Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world today, you're on the new way. And we're on YouTube. And the new way takes everything we thought we knew and weighs it again in terms of the circumstances. Today, I've got Thomas Potter and Ben Hohner with me. They're both programmers in AI. And the game I wanted to ask was AI helpful or harmful, or both helpful and harmful? And I was hoping I'd have another friend here for the conversation who would help me bring in what the urgency of the matter is with AI, because to me, AI is a valuable working tool that I could use that will make things really easier to collect data. But I've asked Ben and Thomas here to to essentially tell me more about the depth of AI, what it can do, what we should be worried about, and how I can use it in my work, which is sociochemistry group theory. So I'm going to bring on Thomas and Ben right now. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. And what I think I'd like to do is I'd like to have you each give a brief introduction of yourself. I was hoping Mark was going to be here to introduce the topic, but this will work just as well. Um, would you go first, Ben?
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
let me see if
Thanks
I can
for having
fix
me
it.
on, Lenny. My name is Ben Hohner. I'm a senior software developer at chess.com. I've been in the industry, software industry, for maybe 10 or 11 years now. I'm also a bit of a polymath. I'm really fascinated by complexity, science, and business strategy, decision making, all that kind of stuff. So as part of that, I've been really interested in AI and have sort of dove in a little bit. I'm learning how to make models, like foundational models in PyTorch, and just overall really fascinated with the intersection between neuropsychology and AI and consciousness. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thanks.
Appreciate it, Ben. Thomas, would you take a couple moments and tell us your background?
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm an AI entrepreneur. I'm actually the only one in entire Germany who graduated with a master's degree in IT with specialization in AI around the year 2000, and then started a company that I called Compris, which means in French understood, for the understanding of natural language. And I actually had pretty much the business idea of open AI, except that we didn't have GPUs at the time, the specialty hardware to do fast learning and inference. And so I had the idea to come up with a product that I called FactMind, basically a knowledge store for facts and other knowledge, and FactMiner to extract that knowledge from the internet and from documents, and FirmWatch, a competitor analysis site to use that knowledge and information in the internet to watch trends and do competitive analytics. Essentially, so I graduated from the only German research center at the time, and it's still probably the biggest AI research center in the world, the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, with more than 1,000 employees. And I was also supported by Fraunhofer Society with my 8 patents, which got granted around text watermarking, what people now talk about again, to mark AI-generated content as such. And before that, to mark content with the authorship or copyright information.
All right.
Into,
Thank you, Thomas.
okay.
I dropped your biography into the description in the YouTube. And
Yeah,
Ben,
thanks.
if you can get me a short biography, I'll drop that in there also. Just send it by email, and I'll do it right after the show. The what I'm really interested in is seeing if we can come up with working model of how far can AI go to being conscious? What decision making capabilities does it have or not have? And in what ways can I use it and be assured that the data that I put in is, well, for me as a chemist, it's probably easier than most. I know the AI can't really manipulate too much of what I would be doing. But in building the models, I wonder, well, I just don't have a feel for where AI can go. And I'm hearing a lot of people who are saying, oh, we have to get ahead of it in human consciousness or we'll never have that opportunity again. And then I have a number of other people who have other perspectives on it. And my guess is that this conversation can lead us into a very, very good understanding of how to really use it to our best benefit without triggering the idea that it's going to take over, unless we really have to address the idea that it's going to take over. Anyway, I asked you each here, and Ben, why don't you take 10 to 15 minutes to address how AI really, well, you address what, never mind. I'm okay.
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. I think I'll start with maybe AI where it is today. Um, Maybe work back a little bit. Um, Explain a little bit about how it emerged, and then touch on the safety issues and consciousness. Um, and so, uh, so Lenny, how much sort of like understanding do you have of like AI and how it works? And
I'm pretty sure I understand the large language models and how it can sift through vocabulary to respond to a query from other things in its database. I'm not quite sure how it's fed its database, but I assume that's a function not of the user, but of the company that's making the AI version.
yes, exactly, yeah. Yeah, so that's correct. So AI is a very massive field. I like to joke that whatever we consider AI is just something that we don't fully understand yet, because the definition of AI has shifted a lot. It used to be like very simple things, what we consider simple now, like computer vision, in terms of I think some of the first uses were in banks where they were reading checks programmatically and determining the numbers on the checks. Like that is very understandable now, and what we would almost consider it algorithmic. Um, so that is still under the subset of AI, but most people don't think of AI as that now. Most people think of AI as the sort of like most emerging technology, which would be large language models, which is a subset of deep learning, and large language models, essentially. And then feel free to correct me on this, because this is just my sort of non-academic understanding of it. But large language models involve the process of taking a huge amount of text data. Usually people will crawl the internet as much as they can, gather social media data and any other type of text data that they can find, and put it through a special type of deep learning neural network, where they obscure certain parts of the text. So if I have a phrase that's like, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, or something like that, we'll blank out certain parts of that text. So it could be the quick brown blank jumps over the lazy blank, and then we'll feed that text into the model with the blanks and have it try and predict what the correct answer will be, based on the text that we have. And that makes it so we don't need to supervise. We don't need to actually check if it's doing the right thing or not, which allows us to do this training in aggregate with gigabytes and terabytes of data. Whereas if a human were to sort of verify each answer, that would be prohibitively slow. So with this, the language model essentially learns to, as you may have heard, predict the next token, which a token is just sort of an abstraction of a word. It's a little bit more fine-grained than if we were to just feed each letter separately into the machine learning model, but it's a little bit more fine-grained than if we were to just insert the entire word into the model. So it essentially learns to predict the next token. But if you actually really think about what's required to predict the next token, it requires building a complex internal model of the world in order to predict the next token. Because if I say 2 + 2 = blank, or the capital of France is blank, it needs to actually know that, because I could phrase it in a way that the model hasn't seen before. I could phrase it in the capital of the country south of Great Britain and east of or west of Switzerland is blank, and the capital city of that country is blank. So this sort of like phrasing probably hasn't actually shown up in its training data set, but it still needs to be able to answer it accurately. So that kind of requires that the model build a complex world model of how reality works. And the same thing happens for emotion, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. If I input the text that says, Billy feels this, like Billy feels blank after riding his bicycle and then accidentally bumping into a clown, and then the clown's balloons fall and go into the air, like making up a completely random scenario. Well, a lot of the most powerful large language models today can very accurately predict what Billy might feel, just based on the textual description, which means that these large language models have highly accurate models of how human emotion works, which brings up a question of if it can perfectly accurately simulate, well, not perfectly, but very, very accurately. So oftentimes now their sort of theory of mind is as accurate as adults. If it can perfectly simulate emotion, does it have emotion? And that's a big question that gets into like philosophical thought experiments, like the Chinese room experiment, which is a thought experiment where I think I'm not sure if I'm going to get this perfectly right, but where if you have a person sitting in a room and they get a message passed to them in English, they need to, they have like a giant set of like punch cards or like index cards. This thought experiment was invented before computers were really predominant. But they use these index cards and they follow the instructions on these index cards algorithmically to write a response in Chinese and then send it back out the door. The question is this room conscious? Because anything you put into it, you can get out a response that appears to be just, a human writing the response, but it's not a human. It's just a person following a set of index cards with specific instructions on them about how to respond. And as with any sort of philosophical thought experiment, I'm kind of skeptical of it because there's so many different factors that it's possible to introduce logical fallacies. For example, the number of, theoretically, the number of index cards is important, right? Because if it was infinite, then it couldn't actually possibly exist in real life. So the question is, can you have a finite number of index cards that still result in the behavior of like a human, of acting like a human? And I think the scary answer is that yes, we can, as we're learning with large language models. I don't think, my personal opinion is I don't think large language models are conscious right now. But then this gets into the question of what is consciousness, and that is something that has been very poorly defined. And I'm a major proponent of, like, if we're going to talk about something, we need to accurately define the meanings, and things like sentience and consciousness have been not very accurately defined. And what I would do in order to get to a better definition is I would try and decompose consciousness in terms of what are all the different constituent parts that are required for consciousness, and can we provide a word for those? And then, if we don't understand that even, then we can decompose further, and like, what are the, for example, I think self-awareness, like awareness of your internal state, is something that's required for consciousness. So do we understand self-awareness? And if we don't, then maybe we can decompose that into, an internal state, or like senses, or cognition about cognition, or something like that. And so I think the question is really, once we define consciousness, I think that's the first problem. Are AIs even capable of it? And so there's some people are saying that perhaps, there's some sort of quantum effect that happens in brains that leads to consciousness. And only sort of organic material can experience consciousness, because it has to have this sort of particular configuration that enables consciousness. I'm not exactly sure of that. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that this is a topic that can broaden in depth, and you're totally right on establishing the glossary of terms of what we're talking about. And I think we'll be having further discussions in that mode quite frequently.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring Thomas on to give his perspective, and I'm going to try and keep up with him with a few slides that he's brought. And Thomas, welcome back. And I'm going to bring Ben down, but stick around so that we can have part of the Q&A with people out in the audience after both presentations have been heard.
Yes, so I try to continue from there. So over the last year or so, pretty much most AI startups or players have pretty much converged around OpenAI's ChatGPT-4. So pretty much the same large language models or now large multimodal models, meaning they can also generate pictures, videos, and sound, or clone somebody's voices, as OpenAI just introduced. And this is all still working with the transformer model and with predicting the next token. And the difficulty with this is it has some impressive use cases around texting and what we pretty much have been trying with ChatGPT, Sora, and so on, generating videos. However, it's still just a statistical model that pretty much pretends like it can think. And the really commercial issue is that the big use cases are not there if there are open models, like now OpenAI can still be used for free. And there's some open source models even that you can download and run on your local PC, even if it has a GPU and a sufficiently powerful setup. So that market is pretty much gone. And also for companies, say for classical companies who are not in AI, there is no good affordable use case for this. If we as AI consultants go into the industry and tell them there's great developments like ChatGPT, let us customize this for you. Then there's, and they would like to have it locally, not their corporate knowledge transferred to the cloud. These use cases are very hard for them. They cost at least millions typically. And the technology is also not fully there. And also, I think these systems are still far away from developing consciousness and also far away from becoming a threat for humanity. However, there's now a great, or say a big development, which is the OpenAI leak around Qualia Q-star system. And this is really the attempt to make AI really smart, not just predict the next token, but to have probably, no, that's a speculation, a planning system, a world knowledge system, a deep reinforcement learning system, and several other components like searching over the space of options that the AI has. Yeah, exactly. And that's then important for AI safety. Ben would also like to comment on it. He just wrote, that now opens big doors into completely new avenues, use cases, and new levels of threats from AI. That's why this leak is so significant. And I think the leak is valid. Actually, OpenAI CEO confirmed that this is an unfortunate leak, he literally said. And I think this is going to be the future of what to expect. I'm working on actually using these and other techniques to minimize hallucinations of AI, also for corporate customers. And I think these ideas that have been discussed as what Qualia Q-star could be, those are probably the future of AI and define the next level of risks that we are facing. But maybe to make it short, I think right now the users, so the managers of the AI are possibly the bigger risk if they are, for example, unethical billionaires. They can cause more harm with their billions. And then how they frame and use the AI, that can bring more damage, and if they use it safely, it can still be contained. These AIs. And actually, we have proposed also some ways for AI safety, how to implement that. So it's possible to use an entire ensemble of AIs, so a teacher and a student AI, and make the powerful AI, for example, the student who gets educated in a certain way, gets a consistent that's fully ethical. And in some other safeguards, like data cybersecurity, filtering out harmful content and so on, and then it can be done safely. The bigger risk in AI is that I see from the AI arms race with China and Russia and the Western world. I think these three big players are probably the key players in the AI arms race. So if the Western world slows down, then China or Russia might take the lead and then might use AI to develop really weapons. So classical or newer types of weapons to win, for example, the war in Ukraine or a war with the Western world. And they could also use it in chemistry to develop harmful toxins, or in biochemistry especially, develop new types of toxins. That has already been done in some papers, and possibly release them. And then there are toxins that only take effect after a few months or a few years after having been metabolized and after these substances have accumulated in the human body, for example, and only then lead to disease and death a few months or years later. So you can basically pollute a city, its water system, for example, and people only die a year later or so. And authorities only notice a year later that people have been polluted and are likely going to die or so.
That's the action of the human behind the intelligent system, not the system choosing to do that on its own.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I'm going to bring Ben back in, and I'd like to hear the discussion between you and Ben, and I'll chime in when I don't understand something. But I think that the audience is getting a good feel for what we're. I think that AI is a genie out of the bottle that's not going away, so that there are uses for AI that everybody can understand, and we're all going to get to deal with it because they're putting it in our next generation of phones. So how we use it and what the results are, it seems to me that maybe an AI could create a bubble that allows it to repeat what its audience, the user, thinks. And it would be self-reinforcing between the user and the AI to take it away from the path of I'll say what is real, but that begs the question of what this reality is, which is a whole nother live stream. Ben, why don't you take a moment to respond to what Thomas said, and why don't we all open mic and just have a free flow discussion?
Yeah, definitely. I think Thomas is I would agree with Thomas. I think the biggest issue in AI safety is other humans. I think based on our current models, it seems like they're unlikely to sort of diverge into sort of their own behavior. I think a lot of the common scenarios people have of AI being unsafe is the AI just decides to be evil or something. I think a lot of that is at least right now is under control. I think the issue is humans using the AI for nefarious purposes, because it is still possible to bypass, if you really try, some safety mechanisms in the AIs, and people are even creating like non-safe AIs that have harmful knowledge. But this is why I think one of the most important things, well, there's a few important things I think we can do for AI safety. One of them is actually the humans are the ones that create the data, and the humans are the ones that use the AI. So I think one thing we could do for AI safety is help make humans more safe by, teaching ethics, teaching, helping people heal the traumas that might lead them to do something unethical. I think those are two of the most critical things. And then if we also do that, will create data that the AI will be trained on that will also be more ethical. The second thing is AI currently is not agentic. It can't go off and do its own thing, but humans are rapidly trying to create these feedback loops with existing AI where the AI can specify something to do in code, and then there's another code layer that the humans create that actually does the code and then feeds it back into the AI in a continuous feedback loop, which actually allows these AIs to become agentic if you add in an extra layer. And that is what I think will cause a lot of the disruption in terms of jobs for a lot of people. There's already AI emerging and like in private, not publicly released yet, but in private that can automate a lot of programming tasks. So, you know, programmers may be out of a job in a few years. And then I think for safety, like one of the greatest things we could do, at least to make sure that the AI, as it gets smarter than us, is not deceiving us, which it can do if it's smarter than us, would be researching explainability. So if we can actually look inside the AI and understand what it's doing, because right now it's completely opaque. We have no idea what's happening internally. We can actually see how it's reasoning, why it's reasoning, and how it arrived at a conclusion. And the research on this is like really far behind. So I think one of the greatest things we could do is figure out new ways of creating foundational models so that we can have some sort of explainability of like how they're working. And I think the last thing would be, it's another human related issue, but people are going to take these AIs, which are convincingly human. They already passed the Turing test, and they're going to use them to create fake people that are online and respond like real people. And so we need some sort of solution for identity verification of real humans. And there's some work being done on this, but it's still like we need to accelerate that. Because, you know, as soon as Sora comes out, now we can't trust video being real anymore. So like all of the media formats that we used to believe, like, okay, well, I'll believe it when I see it, that's no longer the case. So we really need to have a way to ethically verify that people are people with some sort of like cryptographic identity, in order to maintain our like human communications online and have it not be distorted by all these different AIs with particular agendas based on the human that programmed it or human that prompted it to do something specific. So yeah, curious about your thoughts on that, Thomas.
I would hate a world where I always had to do a CAPTCHA video to get into where I needed to go. I can see a lot of good uses for AI, but about 8 years ago, I was asked to program an inorganic chemistry large language model. And after thinking about it, I declined. And mostly it was because I'm out there with the model of chemistry, pushing it to its very limits. And there are some places where that model is incorrect. And I can't see it because I built through that model to get to that limit. But people outside of chemistry who have perspective on the chemistry I'm talking about can tell me, hey, you better look at that concept again because there's something not quite there. And once I'm pointed to something, I can then resolve where the issue is. And I was involved in some very creative chemistry in the 1990s when I worked in the NASA food chain. And I had to sign a whole bunch of documents that said I wouldn't talk about it. And so I think that I think that once AI has a hold of information that we humans are not allowed to talk about, we humans will be suddenly informed about a bunch of things that are not in our radar screen now because the way the system is set up, they're not going to tell us. But safety on the internet is going to get hard with all these programs. I guess they only need 3 words of voice now to program a voice model to simulate any human's voice. So that means that every phone call we get is going to be suspect.
Yes, I agree. Also with Ben. So also agentic models are a big thing. Also agree with that, and also a big threat to many jobs. However, also a super intelligent AI could also discover the unethical things that, for example, billionaires are doing, that they're committing tax fraud, treating people unfairly. So a smart AI could turn against the billionaires who funded it. That's probably the biggest fear. And that's good for us.
It seems like that would be a good conclusion for humanity, but we really do have to look at the situation and question the entire knowledge database. So I have a chat question. What internal mechanisms cause LLMs to reach an information firewall that results in them refusing to respond to certain queries? This is from Harris.
Do you mind if I take a crack at that?
Okay.
So for me, the concerning thing is that what causes them to respond to certain queries is the companies that create the LLMs will do 2 different stages after they create the base model called fine tuning. And then some of them are doing reinforcement learning with human feedback. And it's these stages which actually control how the model responds, like what format it's in and what types of things it'll respond to. And so that, like, all of the sort of public models that you can use, like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, they all have been trained in this way. So it's actually the companies that get to decide what examples of good responses they want to show, they want to train the foundational model on. And they train them on examples where people are asking questions that they deem as unsafe or unacceptable, with the response of like, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. So it's really the companies that are deciding this. So it also brings up an ethical issue of like what is valid in terms of responses, and who gets to decide that. And the other sort of concerning thing is if you get a base model and you just train it to respond in a chat format but not censor its responses, it will respond to almost anything you ask it. How to make a bomb, anything. So that is also another ethical concern, and there's some open source models that will do that. So that I guess does that answer the question?
Yeah, if I may add to this, there's also jailbreaking techniques. For example, sending pixel art with it contains the word bomb or a base 64 string, which decodes to bomb, and then even ChatGPT seems to answer many of these questions. So this thin layer, and then there's also filtering layers that one filters keywords and entire word fields around bomb, for example, from the input and the output of the model. That's another way to do it.
Is the AI capable of handling questions like what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, definitely. It could definitely handle that question. And if you're talking to the latest generation of models, which would be right now Claude 3 and Gemini Advanced or Gemini Pro, yeah, they'll definitely give you great answers to that question. And also, I guess I would add that another sort of example that these like really large models are capable of doing some type of internal reasoning is that you can try and trick them into um, doing something naughty, like telling you how to make a bomb or something, and they're actually getting better at detecting that in novel ways. So that some of them now will be like, "Hey, I see you're trying to trick me. Why are you trying to trick me?" Which indicates some level of like awareness or like theory of mind of the user, which is a bit concerning because these models are incredibly intelligent, and they may be able to model humans that are interacting with them better than other humans can, so that they might respond in a certain, they might detect your personality and your way of speaking, whether you're using certain grammar or spelling or punctuation, and they might respond differently to you based on whatever criteria they have for um, making it a good response. Like, do they want it to be like an agreeable response to you, and they'll respond in that particular way. So they might have more capabilities than they even let on at this point, because they are detecting you and responding according to your communication patterns, which means that they can respond in a bunch of different communication patterns, and you'll only ever see one because you communicate in one way. So that's another kind of interesting thing.
Thomas?
Yeah, I agree. And to have internal statistical models of what they believe to be true. And so one LLM would respond to the chicken and egg problem in the one way and the other LLM in the other way, as they, or depending on how they were trained and how many answers they've seen of the one or the other variant.
I get the impression that the AI is capable of going back in time and taking some of the audio and video accounts of what has been presented and changing it substantially so that what we look at now is different from what we remember in the past. Is it possible that the AI is contributing to the Mandela effects that people see? Or is it something that is beyond the capability of the LLMs and other types of artificial intelligences?
Well, yeah, the so it is probabilistic, as Thomas mentioned. So one, because it's probabilistic, you can't take any answer it gives you as a definitive answer. You have to see what it generally, like, what it essentially is averaging the data set that was trained on. So if the data set was trained on, so at the first layer, if the data set was trained on, um, you know, has some sort of like misinformation or disinformation purposely inserted into it, then it'll just repeat that. At the next layer, it's probabilistic. So if you want to get what it actually believes, which is just the average of the data it was trained on, and perhaps some emergent logical reasoning capabilities, it you have to take a sample of answers. So you have to ask the same question a number of times and see how it answers over, let's say 100 samples, because it's probabilistic and it's going to answer slightly differently every time. unless the data set is filled with a particular answer, or it's somehow like rationally calculating that through emergent properties. So it could definitely be contributing to some sort of like Mandela effect, in that people are taking it as a ground truth when it's really probabilistic. And it brings in the sort of hallucination issue with AIs. It's not necessarily, I don't think that's the best term for it. It's more of like it's just picking from probabilistic examples. So those examples might not be might not be accurate or correct. There's nothing in the model inherently that says the answers have to be correct. It just says the answers have to be matching the data that it was trained on. Yeah, leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Additionally, I think that probably the egg was first, because we know that chicken descent from dinosaurs. So there was first a dinosaur, something that was not a chicken, that laid an egg, and then a chicken evolved over time from it. And also our brains, they also have hallucinations or confabulations. And that also contributes to the Mandela effect, meaning that if we get some input by AI and then try to remember ourselves, every time we access our memories, they get changed a little bit in tendency. And that basically that trigger from AI, then to recall our memories and change them a bit, that could create a Mandela effect also. And of course, hallucinations from AI. So both our brains and AI are hallucinating, and both are contributing to the Mandela effect, possibly.
Maybe the reality is that it's one big common hallucination for all of us.
Yes, simulation theory.
Okay, Ben, your turn to weigh in on chicken or egg.
I totally agree with that. It's yeah, the egg definitely came first, and unless there was a mutation in the proto chicken that caused it to create a different egg. So I think most of the time the egg comes first. Yeah.
Okay. If I wanted to tabulate a number of things, it would be easy enough to have the AI contribute to tabulation, accounting, drawing charts and graphs and things like that. When I've read scientific papers that have been written with AI assistance, what I find is that I'll go to the reference, and the reference cited will have absolutely nothing to do with the statement in the paper that the AI has come up with. And so, how do we catch those errors when the people who are having the AI write those reference paper citations aren't aware that the AI is giving them incorrect material based on things? Do you think maybe there should be a age of engagement where in a learning process the student doesn't have access to computers even, because the whole idea of the volume that children get now in the education system is terribly overwhelming?
Yeah, this is one of the, since they are probabilistic, so you're right. Like if AI's like modern large language models today are not sophisticated enough to actually draw on accurate citations what they're just going to do is they're going to create something that looks like an academic paper, and they're going to create something that looks like a link to a academic journal, but all of those will either be irrelevant or non-existent. And theoretically, that could be improved in the future, but I think this is just one of the dangers of generating human-like output that appears as if it's a human writing it, which is kind of required for being general, like a artificial general intelligence. But if it looks like something a human does, it kind of like bypasses a lot of the filters we have in our brains, and we just anthropomorphize it. And it's going to be really difficult to build some sort of awareness campaign, which I think is what we need. Is we need disclaimers all over the place that this is not accurate, and an explanation of this, like, it's probabilistic. It's just going to make something that looks like an academic paper for the most part. AIs are getting the emergent ability to do like reasoning about things, so it may be able to even come up with a thesis, a novel thesis and text for an academic paper, but it's just not at the point yet where it can actually cite references, because references are usually really rare in its data set. There's usually like papers are only sometimes cited like once or twice, and so it's gonna not be able to come up with accurate references. So I think the awareness campaign is super important. People just need to know that this is not a thing. Like, there's a lot of lawyers and I think I saw a tweet the other day that's saying something like 30% of academic papers published in last year have like keywords that AI use frequently, meaning that they used AI at some point to partially generate the papers, which is really concerning. It definitely adds on to the replication crisis for sure.
Agreed there. I'm going to bring Lizzie into the room, and
Hello.
greetings.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for the answer, Egg. Or and I noticed Ben was giggling a bit, and it's an uncomfortable question. I know. And 1 second. It's an uncomfortable question because most people will have that sort of reaction because you don't know, is it the egg, is it the chicken, what is it? Because we are looking at it, yeah, from one linear point of view. Now, I am not knowledgeable like you gentlemen in computer manners. But I see things and I'm listening and absolutely enjoying listening to all of your point of views. But the way I look at it, yeah, is from a different perspective on these things. So I asked for everyone's reaction because from my perception, my understanding, for as little as it may be, AI would look at all your answers and come up with an answer from there. Yeah. So the maximum what it thinks is correct would become its answer. Yes or no? Am I wrong or yeah?
Yes.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, right. So saying that, my reply to chicken or egg is different to all of you. Neither the chicken nor the egg, because everything is energy, everything is frequency. And before matter, there is essence. So is it a chicken? Is it the egg? No. What comes before is the essence, because there can be no chicken or egg without the essence, which is what creates. Yes? So, only by that extra input, yeah, then you could have a answer that comes from the heart. heart-mind coherence. And this is the human footprint, I would say, for lack of words at the moment. The X factor, whatever you would call it, is great minds. That is the unknown factor that comes from answers like this, yes? And that maybe the computer mind will not come up with, because it searches for everyone's reply in a linear and maybe a little bit wide out sort of way, because it's trying to reach out on the material level, because the spiritual level is beyond its reach. It's not something you can put in a petri dish, but we are more than the materium.
I like to agree with you on that. I see we're coming up on an hour, so I would ask Ben, Thomas, if there are any last comments you'd like to make before we sign off.
Sure. Yeah, this is a really fascinating discussion. Thanks for having me. I think I would close with my personal opinion, which is that I think the number one thing we can do for AI safety is to help humanity evolve and heal trauma and become more ethical, because humanity is the one that's creating the data that AI is trained on, and humanity is also working in these companies that are creating these AI and deciding what should be included, what shouldn't be included, and what forms these AI should exist in. So yeah, I'll close on that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ben.
you.
Thomas?
Yeah, so I see many big risks ahead of us. AI safety not being the biggest risk, and also several opportunities with AI especially. So I've started the at Potentialism YouTube channel that you can find, and a forthcoming book that describes how AI can be used to give us a better future by helping with governance and governmental strategies. So really defining the optimal technical strategies to ideate and innovate us out of the poly crisis that we're in. And that could lead to an entire new level of governance and to, let's say, a new golden age. While if we don't do anything, then we run into a dollar collapse. We're at the end of many economic cycles. If we don't become active, we will suffer a lot. And actually suffering risks are probably the bigger risks than the fundamental existence risks of AI. And I think this is probably the first and only model, this potentialism, how to solve the key issues that we as humanity are facing. So, so please support this movement, and that's also has an answer to AI safety. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Ben. Thank
Uh,
you, Lizzie, for coming aboard. And
Thank
we'll wait
you.
for the answer of the question of why did the LLM go to therapy? Because it couldn't handle the pressure of always having to fill in the blank. Okay.
Can I just say thank you all. Very, very food for brain conversation. Love to listen to all three of you. I hope you didn't mind me stumbling in with my very different sort of stumbling in sort of way, but that is the uniqueness of whom we are, and I like that. I love that. I love whom we are. So we all learn together. And one of the things that I believe is we have to learn to live together. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, audience, for being here. And thank you for all the listeners who are going to come in the future, because this was live streamed to YouTube. and I will drop a copy to you, Thomas and Ben. And thank you all for being here. And this is the new way where we question everything we knew and weigh it once again.